Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping into the peaceful, deliberate world of a Ming Dynasty scholar, not during an exam or a crisis, but on an ordinary day filled with ink, tea, and the comforting creak of paper screens. If you think your calendar is too full to appreciate a man deciding which brush to use for his third poem of the morning, well, you probably won't survive this kind of calm precision. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the sound of the wind nudging the bamboo screen. It's a soft rustling, rhythmic and light, like a brush being tested on a fresh page. The room is still dim, though the rising sun has begun to filter through the oiled paper windows, casting warm streaks across the polished floorboards. You lie on a low wooden bed, the blanket pulled to your chest, a quiet stillness curled in your limbs. There is no need to rush. You've spent years cultivating a life where mornings belong to observation, not obligation. Your robe waits folded at the foot of the bed, light cotton, lined for early spring. You sit up, easing into the coolness of the room. No shoes yet. You cross the wooden floor barefoot, letting the chilled grain register beneath your soles. In the courtyard outside, a gardener begins sweeping the stone path with a long-handled broom. You hear it. Faintly straw bristles tracing the surface in wide, even strokes. He doesn't speak. There is nothing to announce. His work, like yours, is meant to leave the world slightly better than it was. You cleanse your face using the water basin left on the veranda. It's cold, drawn just before dawn from the well. You cup it in both hands and press it gently to your cheeks, then over your eyes. The sting sharpens you, not harshly, just enough to remind your thoughts where to gather. A servant appears with your morning tea. He bows slightly, not intruding, and sets the tray on the lacquered table. A single pot, 2 cups, one for you, one for whoever the day brings. The tea is still steeping, its pale leaves unfurling in slow spirals. You wait. The first cup is always quiet. You pour when the water turns pale green and translucent, barely fragrant. The warmth slips into the clay cup, and your fingers gather around it like old friends. You sip slowly, not to wake up, to arrive. There is no sound except the wind in the bamboo and the soft hum of boiling water retreating back into stillness. You step into your study. It's a room with 3 walls and one side open to the garden. The space is simple, a low desk, an inkstone, brushes hanging from wooden pegs. On the shelf, scrolls, some copied, some composed, in the corner. A single zither sits untouched since yesterday, its strings quiet, but perfectly in tune. You kneel at the desk and unroll a sheet of paper. The first writing of the day is never hurried. It may be a poem, it may be a note to a friend, or simply a transcription of a favorite passage from the classic of poetry. You prepare the ink with steady hands, grinding the stick against the wet stone in circular motions until the fluid pools into the familiar, deep black. You choose a brush, not your finest, but not your roughest. You test its balance in your hand, then dip and begin. The first stroke is slow, deliberate, a horizontal line, then a vertical. The characters build from silence. In Ming scholarship, the act of writing is inseparable from reflection. One word considered well outweighs a page written quickly. You copy 4 lines. You pause. You breathe. You dip the brush again. From the garden. A bird calls out once, clear and soft. You look up, but you don't need to see it. The sound itself is enough. You finish your passage and let the page dry on a bamboo rack. You don't reread it now. You know its shape. You know your hand. Later, you will examine the brushwork more carefully. Note the angles, the weight of the ink, how the lower stroke of a character curled slightly in the 3rd line. But for now, you simply let it be. You take another sip of tea. It's cooler now, the flavor stronger. You watch the steam fade from the rim of the cup, and for a long moment, you do not write, you do not move, you only sit, and the silence shapes itself around you. You remain seated for a while, the brush now resting in its stand, its bristles still faintly wet with the last stroke of ink. The courtyard outside is beginning to brighten, sunlight catching on the polished stones, forming patches of warm gold that stretch out from beneath the eaves. You let your gaze fall on the paper you finished earlier, now dry. The characters rest on the page with quiet confidence, each line leaning into the next, like reeds in a careful arrangement. You rise. Your body responds without resistance. The air feels different now, still cool, but no longer tentative. The day has fully arrived. As you step into the garden, the moss between the stones yields faintly underfoot. A few petals have fallen overnight from the magnolia tree. One rests in the water basin, another clings to a sandalwood post. You don't disturb them. Near the gate, the gardener continues his work. He is silent, though his movement speaks of rhythm, his strokes even, his shoulders calm. You bow slightly as you pass. He does the same. No exchange is needed. In the world of the Ming scholar, acknowledgement does not require conversation. You make your way to the rear pavilion. This is your place for reading, where the windows open on all 4 sides, and the scent of pine wood mingles with distant incense. The low table is bare except for 2 scrolls left out from the day before, carefully weighted at each end with polished stones. You settle onto the mat, crossing your legs slowly. The scrolls wait without urgency. You reach for the first. It's a commentary on Zhuangzi, the Taoist text you've returned to again and again, not for its doctrine, but for its language. The characters are small and precise, copied by a monk whose brushmanship suggests both mastery and restraint. You unroll 2 feet of the scroll and begin reading from the middle. Ming scholars often favored this approach, not linear, not prescriptive, but fluid. You trace the lines with a finger, a passage about the joy of drifting with the wind, another about the uselessness of usefulness. You pause. You consider the idea that a gnarled tree, too twisted for lumber, might live longer than all the straight ones. You smile. A bird lands on the sill. Its feathers catch the sun for a moment, dark at the tips, bright at the breast. It chirps once and tilts its head, then hops once along the edge before flying off. You do not follow it with your eyes. You return to the scroll, somewhere in the house. A bell sounds softly, not an alarm, a gentle signal from the kitchen. The midday meal is being prepared. You finish the passage you're reading, roll the scroll back with slow fingers, and set the stones on top once more. Then you rise and stretch, your arms moving wide, your spine uncoiling like bamboo after a cold night. You walk slowly toward the dining room. The path passes under a trellis where gourds are beginning to form. The green is rich, thick with promise. One vine wraps itself around the beam in a perfect spiral. You trace its curl with your eyes before stepping onward. In the dining hall, the table is low and modest. A simple ceramic dish holds sliced radish with vinegar, a bowl of hot rice, steamed to just the right stickiness, a serving of soft tofu garnished with scallions, and a plate of stir-fried greens, seasoned not with extravagance, but balance. You take your seat, you lift your bowl with both hands, and for a time there is no thinking, only eating. The rice is warm, the vinegar sharp but not overwhelming. The tofu, smooth and fragrant, reminds you of a line from Sushi Plainness, is not poverty, it is peace. You think about that as you chew, slowly and without distraction. A servant pours tea again, this one darker, fermented with a whisper of smoke. You sip it, feeling the difference immediately. This is not the morning's green brightness. This is weight, earth, depth. It fills the mouth, not with flavor, but with calm. After the meal, you return to the study. You sit once more before the open window. The brush is still there. The ink has dried. You pour a fresh drop of water onto the stone and begin to grind again. The motion is circular, like time here, neither rushed nor interrupted, just continuous. A fringe theory in Ming-era calligraphy manuals argued that writing each character should take exactly as long as a slow breath, not longer, not shorter. The stroke and the exhale bound together. You test that rhythm now as you lift the brush and begin again. The paper accepts your strokes. The silence returns. The day resumes, not in steps, in cycles. The afternoon settles into the study like a ribbon unwinding itself across a tabletop, slow, graceful, soft at the edges. The light has changed again. What once streamed brightly from the east now filters in from a higher angle, grazing the open window slats and casting wide, lattice-shaped shadows onto the tiled floor. You sit with your knees folded beneath you, brush in hand, the ink just deep enough in tone to mark the fresh paper without bleeding. You are copying a line of poetry today, not composing, copying, a verse from Wang Wei. You chose it not for its complexity, but for the way it describes stillness, sitting alone in the quiet forest. I play the zither, and the birds return. The characters build beneath your brush, like old stones being placed one by one into a courtyard wall. Each stroke exists independently, but joins the others in a rhythm that belongs to the page, not the hand, outside the study. A breeze rises. It catches in the wind chimes suspended from the corner beam, thin slivers of bronze and carved wood that strike each other gently, unpredictably. The sound is not melodic, but it is precise, like water dripping into a clay jar. You pause between lines to listen. A servant arrives with a tray. He carries a small bowl of sliced pear and a second cup of oolong, cooler now, aged in a clay jar, its leaves unfurled long ago. He does not speak. He sets the tray beside your writing mat and disappears with the same silence he brought. You sip once, Let the bitterness spread across your tongue, then return to your brush. The inkstone is lighter now. The stick has worn down since morning, its edges rounded from hours of grinding. You rinse the stone with a splash of clean water from a nearby vessel, catching the runoff in a shallow dish. The scent of pine ink and damp stone rises faintly, steady and grounding. Your writing slows, not from fatigue, from presence. Each character becomes less about its meaning and more about its weight. You linger on the final line. When it's done, you hold the brush aloft and wait for a single bead of ink to fall from its tip before resting it in its cradle. You rise and stretch. The tatami mat creaks beneath your feet. The garden is visible beyond the wooden veranda, where shadows now lie longer across the stepping stones. A few leaves drift down from the ginkgo tree. The wind has changed direction. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's child calls to someone. You hear no response, just the call. You walk through the corridor toward your reading pavilion. It is quieter than the study, not because it holds less, but because it demands less. Here, you keep scrolls that are never hurried, histories, letters, fragments of the Analects, a handful of Buddhist verses translated from Sanskrit with visible hesitation in the calligraphy. You choose one at random. Let it open itself to a passage halfway through. Do not seek to arrive, seek to dwell. The phrase lands gently. You let it remain open on the table and sit beside it, your legs crossed again, hands resting palms up. The zither sits to your right. You do not touch it, you listen. The silence has deepened, not as an absence, but as a presence of its own. A Ming scholar once wrote that the most important part of a house was the space between things, the empty walls, the quiet rooms, the open courtyards. These were not neglected. They were cultivated, because thought cannot breathe when it is crowded. You breathe deeply now. The scroll before you waits. The tea has cooled. The paper on the desk is dry. And still, nothing feels finished. You walk once more to the inner garden. The koi pond has darkened with the angle of the sun. The fish beneath the surface are slow now, moving in loops, each one aware of the others but unconcerned. A plum blossom floats across the water. It lands, spins once, then drifts toward the shallow end. You kneel beside the pond. Place your hand on the stone edge. You do not reach for the blossom. You watch it go. The day has entered its final hours, and your breath matches its pace. Evening light drapes across the study like a carefully hung scroll. Its edges warm, its center softened into amber. You return slowly from the pond, the scent of moss and stone still fresh in your sleeves. The corridor's hushed, no footsteps, no doors opening, no voices carried from adjacent rooms. A breeze passes gently through the courtyard, lifting the corners of a few drying pages on your desk. They flutter once, then settle. You light a lamp, not for necessity, not yet. The sun still lingers at the roofline, but for transition. The wick catches easily, and the flame draws up with a small motion, throwing a circle of quiet orange across the room. Its reflection glows faintly on the polished inkstone. There will be no more writing tonight, not with brush, at least. You clean it with care, drawing it through a cloth, rinsing it in a shallow bowl, and combing the bristles with your thumb. It returns to its hook to dry in silence, the last bead of water sliding from its handle to the floor with a sound too soft to repeat. Your robe, slightly rumpled, now smells faintly of tea and paper. You change into another, looser, dyed a soft gray, and slide your feet into padded cloth shoes. The floor beneath you is cool but not unkind. You pass once more into the garden, where the shadows now stretch fully across the paving stones. Dinner is quiet, always. The table has already been prepared when you arrive. A lacquered tray sits atop a woven mat, its contents arranged with care pickled cabbage, rice seasoned with a hint of ginger, steamed greens dressed with sesame oil, and a single dish of fish wrapped in lotus leaf. No garnish, no excessive seasoning. Each item placed for balance, not display. You eat slowly. The chopsticks rest naturally in your fingers. The food requires no comment. Its flavor is secondary to its purpose, to ground the body so the mind can be still. Each bite carries the memory of soil, the passing of seasons, the invisible work of hands not present at the table. You finish, then sip a final cup of tea. This one is darker still, aged and earthy, steeped twice over to remove its sharpness. It lingers on the tongue like stone, warmed by a passing sun. You set the cup down. A servant enters to clear the tray. She bows once, then exits without a word. There is nothing left to do, and that is the intention. You move to the small terrace just outside your chamber. The night air has arrived gently, brushing across your cheeks with the scent of pine and distant firewood. From the hills beyond the compound wall, a dog barks once, then again. Its voice fades into the hush of dusk. The moon rises slowly. Its reflection pools across the surface of the pond, broken only by the faintest ripple from a fish drifting just beneath the water's skin. You sit, hands folded in your lap, and breathe once, then again, each breath deeper than the last. A fringe essay preserved in a 16th century anthology once claimed that time, in a scholar's home, should pass like silk unrolling from a loom, smooth, unhurried, without interruption. You think about that now, watching the shadows lengthen on the garden wall. The loom was never meant to be heard, only to be trusted. You remain seated long after the moon has risen high, somewhere in the house. A bell chimes softly. Perhaps someone has finished their own writing for the day. Perhaps it was a breeze brushing a chime in the hallway. The sound doesn't repeat. It doesn't need to, eventually. You return to your chamber. The lamp has been trimmed, your bed prepared. The robe slips from your shoulders without effort. The blanket folds over you like water, returning to a calm well. The night air moves gently through the lattice, bringing with it nothing you need to hold, nothing you need to name. You lie still. Your eyes find the shadows cast on the paper screen. Branches sway. Their silhouettes dance across the wall, forming lines more elegant than any poem you've written today. You do not move. You do not speak. You simply allow the quiet to gather. And it does. Easily. You sleep as if the day never needed to end, lightly, without interruption. Each breath folded into the next, like the soft layering of silk robes. There is no dream you remember, just the certainty that the night held you gently, and that the house, like a watchful elder, kept its silence. The morning returns through familiar gestures, not loud, not abrupt. The paper screen catches a faint touch of pale gold, and with it, the room becomes visible in soft relief: the low writing table, the folded robe on the stool, the scroll you left open on the windowsill, still exactly where you placed it before sleeping. You rise slowly. There is no alarm to silence, only the sound of your own steps across the floor, quiet, padded, so confident, so you wash your face at the basin again. The water is fresh, drawn just before dawn. You splash it gently, once, then a second time, no more. The cold is less biting than yesterday, or perhaps your skin is more accepting. The robe you choose today is simpler, undyed, faintly creased along the edges from storage. You smooth it over your shoulder with practiced hands, the fabric whispering faintly against itself. A servant has left your tea on the low veranda rail. One pot, one cup, as always. You carry it back into the room, sit cross-legged on the mat, pour slowly, letting the steam rise toward your face. The scent grounding your thoughts before your first sip, the warmth enters not just your hands, but the space around you, returning the room to its rhythm. You reach for the scroll. You do not read. You only touch it and feel its quiet invitation. Then, when the tea is half gone, you lift the scroll and walk out into the rear garden. The path crunches gently beneath your feet. The plum trees are in early bloom. A few petals have gathered near the edge of the water basin, their pale pink spreading like ink in clear liquid. You sit on a low bench. The scroll opens without resistance, its edges curling slightly at the corners from age and use. The passage is from the Book of Rites, a section on personal cultivation. Not rules, rhythms. It speaks of measured movements, of not speaking too quickly, of arranging one's space with intention, so the mind can inhabit it fully. You read each line twice, not to memorize, to absorb. The air shifts again. A light gust passes through the garden. The scroll flutters faintly. A petal lifts, hovers in front of your lap, and lands on the corner of the page without smearing the ink. You leave it there. You return indoors when the sun has risen fully over the garden wall. Today, there will be a guest, not announced formally, but expected in the rhythm of the week. A fellow scholar from a nearby town, an old friend who writes better than he speaks, who rarely finishes a meal without reciting a line of verse about rain, or snow, or the shape of a cicada's wing. You prepare a second cup of tea, and while the water boils, you take out a fresh sheet of paper. The ink today is richer, aged longer, ground more thoroughly. You adjust the brush, turning it twice between your fingers until it balances perfectly in your palm. Then you begin, not a poem, a letter. There is no urgency. You begin with the date, then a line about the trees in bloom, then one about the wind. The brush moves like a reed over water, bending, pausing, lifting again. You do not rush. The letter will be finished when it is ready. A fringe anecdote, preserved in a private Ming diary, recounts a scholar who once spent an entire week composing a 5-line greeting to an old acquaintance, not because he was indecisive, but because he believed the right tone could carry more than meaning. It could carry care. You finish the 4th line of your letter. You pause, set the brush down, and rise. You walk back into the garden. The guest is approaching, his silhouette framed in the gate's opening, scrolls tucked beneath one arm, his robe swept by the wind. You bow slightly as he steps inside. He does the same. No words yet, only tea and time. You gesture toward the study, and your guest follows. His steps echo faintly across the stone path, robes catching in the wind like pale sails moving through morning. He carries no bag, no bundle, just two scrolls bound with silk thread and the faint scent of pine smoke lingering in the folds of his sleeve. You hold the door for him, though he doesn't wait for it. Familiarity does not require ceremony. You both settle onto the mats across from one another. The tea is poured without comment. The pot has cooled slightly, but holds its warmth well. You fill his cup first, then your own. The steam rises evenly, curling once before vanishing between you. He lifts the cup and nods. That is enough. You drink together. He unrolls the first scroll, slowly, carefully, with the kind of ease that can only come from years of unhurried practice. The paper is filled with calligraphy, not his finest, perhaps, but clear, structured, generous in its spacing. A poem, judging by the form, 4 stanzas, each line aligned like a row of plum trees after winter. He recites the first line, then pauses. The room holds its breath as the words settle. A verse about morning mist caught in the folds of a mountain path. The second line draws on bamboo. The third, wind over broken tiles. The fourth, a reflection of geese in shallow water. You respond not with words, but with silence. That's what he wants. When he finishes, you unroll your own page, not a poem. A reflection, notes on a passage from Confucius, copied earlier in the week. You read it aloud slowly, not for his benefit, but to re-enter the words with a second voice. He closes his eyes and listens, then opens them, smiling faintly. The next hour passes in quiet exchange, not rapid, not rehearsed. You speak in turns, never interrupting, never performing. He asks what ink you used for the thicker strokes. You answer that it was pine soot, ground longer than usual. He nods, says nothing more. It's understood. At one point, you share a pear, sliced thinly, served with pickled ginger on a lacquered tray. He eats slowly, fingers steady, eyes drifting to the garden just beyond the veranda. He points to a bird that perches on the bamboo railing, its wings dusted in gold, its eye black and patient. You both watch. The bird does not move. And then, without warning, it lifts into the air and is gone. Your guest closes his scroll. He says he will return next week. You nod, offer him a fresh page to take with him, your own poem, written earlier that morning, still damp at the corners. He receives it as one would accept a small bowl of water, carefully, with both hands, when he leaves. You do not walk him to the gate. He doesn't expect it. Instead, you return to the study. The tea is still warm. The scrolls have been rolled and tied. You tidy your brush, pour out the remaining ink, and wipe the table clean. Then you walk once more into the garden. The light is higher now. The sun has claimed the southern wall, casting the veranda in angled shadow. You sit beneath the magnolia tree, where 2 petals have fallen onto the stone path, and one rests in the folds of your robe. The koi stir again, shifting in small spirals near the surface. Their movement creates no sound. A breeze passes. The bamboo bends. Somewhere, a servant sweeps dust from the edge of the western corridor. You do not rise. You remain beneath the tree and listen. The silence is no longer empty. It is full. A Ming scholar once described the end of a shared reading as the moment when the words walk away. But their footprints remain in the dust between us. You look down at the stone, where the petal rests beside your hand. You don't move it. You don't need to. Late afternoon arrives with the stillness of a scroll that has been fully unrolled. You sit quietly beneath the magnolia tree, legs crossed, back resting lightly against the polished column that supports the veranda's corner. The air, once alive with movement, now hums with quiet equilibrium. A dragonfly circles the pond twice, then lands perfectly still on the surface of a lily leaf, its wings motionless except for the shimmer of light sliding across them. The house holds its breath. Even the rustle of bamboo has softened. You rise slowly, leaving the petal where it fell, and walk toward the pavilion near the northern garden wall. It is a less used corner of the compound, shaded almost entirely by camphor trees. The path curves there, never directly. No Ming garden would allow a straight line where reflection is meant to occur. At the pavilion entrance, a wooden bench waits. You sit here. The walls are simple, no decoration, no scrolls, no instruments, just open space. The scent of camphor resin, and a low shelf with a few old texts, each worn from use and carefully rewrapped in cloth. You choose one, though it barely matters which. A book of mountain sketches by a wandering monk from the mid-Ming period. Ink on paper, no color. You open the scroll slowly, allowing the creases to release themselves one by one. Each drawing is quiet. A peak rises through mist. A narrow bridge stretches between cliffs. A hut, alone on a ledge. Each scene offers no action, no narrative, no characters to follow, only the invitation to remain in place. The painter never signed his work. He left space in the margins for whoever held the scroll to add their own thoughts. You do not write. You trace the strokes with your eyes. The brushwork is confident, but never proud. Lines taper gently, then vanish before they resolve. Trees fade into clouds. Paths stop at edges. The mountain is whole, even when only half is shown. A gust of wind stirs the scroll. You pause, then let it close. You do not reopen it. You replace it on the shelf, your hands careful, your fingertips pressing the cloth shut with a finality that feels like a bow. In the garden, the light has shifted again. The koi no longer rise to the surface. The water reflects only the tallest cypress. You hear, faintly, the sound of boiling water from the kitchen, a clay lid rattling. The fragrance of roasted grain tea lifts into the corridor. You walk slowly back toward the central hall. On the way, you pass through the library. You stop at a shelf not for reading, but for arranging. One scroll has tilted forward, its label half turned. You adjust it gently, rotating the cord to its proper place, aligning the title with the rest. A minor act, but meaningful. A Ming household was a space of cultivated order, not control, but quiet alignment. You light the evening lamp. It's a smaller flame than usual, its oil nearly spent. Still, it throws a gentle glow across the polished desk. You reach for a blank page and write just 3 characters across its center. No preface, no punctuation. A phrase from memory, drawn from a dream 2 nights ago. Still pond, clear moon. You read it once, then fold the paper, place it beneath a river stone on your desk, and leave the room, outside. The shadows are long and cool. The temperature has dropped slightly, and the evening air has taken on the scent of cedar. In the distance, someone strikes a bell. You follow the sound with your thoughts, not your feet. A fringe poem. passed between students during the Wanli reign, described evening as the hour when the world turns its face inward, not to sleep, but to reflect. You pause at the veranda, watch the lamp inside flicker, watch the breeze lift the corner of a rug, watch a cat stretch, then curl into a tighter circle by the doorway. You breathe in through your nose, let the air rest in your chest, then release it slowly, as if exhaling the scroll you never finished reading. The light fades without regret, and the day, full of ordinary beauty, settles into a silence that belongs entirely to you. Dusk folds the compound into layers: roof tile, tree limb, distant ridge. Each layer deepens the sense of enclosure, not in a way that restricts, but in a way that protects. You stand quietly on the veranda, one hand resting on the wooden column, your gaze steady as the final birds sweep low over the garden wall. Their wings cut brief silhouettes against the sky, then vanish without farewell. The bell you heard earlier has rung a second time. Its echo is lower now, softer. You return indoors. The lamp you lit earlier has burned down, its wick curved slightly into the oil pool. You trim it carefully, your movements slow, practiced, performed with the kind of patience no one ever teaches. The flame returns to balance. You prepare your bedding. The mat is unrolled, the blanket folded at its head. You check the window lattice, open just enough to let the air in, not enough to let it startle. The screen has shifted slightly from the breeze. You adjust it without thought. There is still time. You step outside once more, this time with a scroll tucked under your arm and a small cup of roasted barley tea in your hand. The tea is hot, its warmth centered in the clay rather than the liquid. You take one sip, then set the cup beside the bench near the water basin. You sit cross-legged, the scroll resting loosely across your knees. It is not a long text, just a series of observations, written by a minor official who retired early to live in the hills beyond Hangzhou. His prose is modest, filled with the shape of simple things. He describes how dew collects on his gate latch, how frogs fall silent just before a rain, how his ink sometimes dries in the well before he finishes a line, and how he's learned not to mind. You nod slightly as you read. You know that feeling. The ink drying not because time ran out, but because the moment passed. You reach the end of the scroll, where a final note is written not in the main hand, but in smaller script. I do not know if this is useful, but it is mine. You sit with that for a while, then you roll the scroll back up, tie it gently, and place it beside you on the bench. The garden darkens. A lantern flickers to life near the corridor. Someone has lit it for you, knowing you might return this way without needing light, but appreciating the thought of it anyway. That's how things work here. Quiet action without recognition. You take a second sip of tea. It is cooler now, its bitterness softened. You think back to a phrase your teacher once wrote. In the corner of your workbook, even useless ink can show the wind's direction. You didn't understand it then. You do now. You finish your tea, stand, carry the scroll with you, but not the cup. A servant will find it and return it to its place. You do not worry. Inside the house, the walls hold the heat of the day just long enough to ease you into evening. You enter your sleeping room. The lamp has grown lower but still burns. The mat waits. You remove your robe, fold it carefully, place it over the wooden bench. Then lower yourself to the mat. Your body sighs without sound. A breeze enters again through the lattice, brushing the edge of the blanket, stirring a loose hair on your forehead. You close your eyes. There is no ceremony now, only rhythm, only breath, only the slow accumulation of quiet. The scroll rests beside your pillow, its cord loosened, its last line unread. You do not need to finish it. You already have. You wake before the light touches the windows, not because of restlessness, and not because anything called you. The silence itself wakes you, whole, intact, and heavy with meaning. You open your eyes slowly, letting the room come into shape before you move. The air is cool. The oil lamp burned out in the night, its wick curled like a sleeping petal in a dish of wax. You do not light another. You sit upright. Outside, the courtyard is hidden in shadow, but the garden stirs. A frog chirps once from the pond, somewhere along the roof tiles. A squirrel patters, slips, then scampers again. You wrap your robe around your shoulders, crossing it left over right, tying it at your waist in 2 practiced motions. You don't look in a mirror. You don't need to. You know how your robe falls, how your sleeves hang. You step outside barefoot. The stone is wet with dew. The sky above is still the color of ink, just beginning to thin at the edges. Your feet leave soft prints across the veranda as you move toward the far end of the compound, where the bamboo grove thickens. You do not go there often. That is precisely why you go now. The bamboo creaks in the wind, a sound like breath through hollow pipes. You walk into the grove. The trees lean above you, tall, slender, eternal in their sway. You press your hand to one of the trunks. The surface is smooth and cool. You don't press hard. You only make contact. The breeze continues. Bamboo bends and bends again. You sit on a low stone, one kept here by no one's intention but gravity. The grove speaks above you. No language, just movement. You close your eyes. Your breath slows. This, too, is part of your daily routine, not planned but permitted. A scholar in the late Ming period once wrote in a private letter, "The most disciplined practice is allowing nature to remind you when to pause. You remain seated until the sky begins to shift toward gray-blue. Then you rise. You return home slowly. The kitchen has stirred. A soft clang of ceramic bowls, a cough muffled through a sleeve. The scent of rice just beginning to steam rises faintly, mixed with ginger and the sharp edge of pickled greens warming over the fire. You pass the central corridor. The scroll you left the night before is still beside the bench. You pick it up, retie the cord, and return it to the shelf without rereading the final lines. Instead, you retrieve a blank sheet, sit at the writing table, grind the ink again, slowly, in circles, not rushing, not yet writing. Your brush rests nearby. The ink grows darker, smoother, more patient. You finally lift the brush. The first character forms, a mountain, followed by mist. Then the word for drift. You do not yet know what this will become. A poem, a letter, perhaps only a fragment meant to be folded and forgotten. But you write it anyway, line by line, as if your hand remembers something your mind does not. When you finish, you let the brush rest. The page dries on the rack. You stand once more and return to the garden, where the sun now spills across the stone in soft rectangles. Tea has been prepared, 2 cups again. The second, as always, waits for whoever the day may bring. You sip your own, warm now, slightly astringent with the faintest note of chrysanthemum. A plum blossom falls. It lands near the cup. You do not move it. The rest of the morning unfolds as if guided by the turning of a page no hand can hold. You sit in the courtyard once more, teacup balanced in your palm, your gaze slipping between the tiled edge of the roof and the slow movement of light across the garden stones. The plum blossom that landed beside your tea has curled slightly now, its edges drying, its color softening into a gentler hue. It stays where it fell. The house hums with quiet activity. A servant passes down the corridor with a scroll tucked beneath one arm and a writing tray in the other. She moves slowly, her steps deliberate, the brushpot balanced carefully at her hip. She pauses to bow when she sees you, then continues toward the western study. No conversation, just motion. You return to your own writing space. The paper you filled earlier has dried, its strokes holding their shape with a kind of quiet pride. You examine each line not to critique, but to observe. The third character, the one for drift, leans slightly forward. You hadn't meant it to, but now it suggests movement, a blessing disguised as an accident. You nod once, leave it as it is. You place the page with others, a growing collection of morning writings, folded and stored in a wooden box near the window, not catalogued, not sealed, just held, like thoughts waiting for later eyes. By late morning, the day has grown brighter, the wind calmer. The bell rings once near the entrance gate, not the brass bell for visitors, but the smaller clay one suspended from a tree. It sounds only when touched by passing air. You pause, unsure if you truly heard it, or if it was memory. The front gate opens. Your gardener enters, his robe dusted with earth, a bundle of herbs wrapped in straw tucked beneath one arm. He nods in greeting, his face unreadable but peaceful. He sets the herbs at the base of the kitchen wall and disappears around the side of the house. Lunch today is prepared with roots pulled from the back edge of the garden, burdock and turnip, simmered in miso, served with warm rice and slices of dried tofu, pressed and rehydrated. You eat alone, facing the open garden, where sunlight now sits steadily across the middle terrace. You take your time. There is no second guest today, only the whisper of yesterday's visit, lingering in the air like the scent of cooled ink. You return your bowl and carry your tea back to the study. Instead of writing, you unroll a scroll from the lower shelf, an older one, its edges fraying, its silk ties faded almost to gray. It contains a travelogue written by a scholar who crossed the country by foot, from Suzhou to Chengdu, and recorded what he saw only in images. No narrative, no dates, just places drawn in ink and labeled with a single word bridge. Shrine, rain, ridge, orchard. You read the scroll not for instruction, but for pace. Each image reminds you how to look. Each word reminds you how little needs to be said. You roll the scroll again, slowly, then sit in silence, staring at the blank wall across the room, letting the space between things sharpen your attention. A Ming philosopher once wrote, "To perceive clearly is not to gather more, but to remove what obscures." You think about that as you sweep your fingers across the desk, clearing a bit of dust from the edge of the inkstone. Outside, the wind stirs again, A door creaks softly. A sparrow calls. The house receives each sound like a breath, drawn in gently, then released. You stand and walk once more into the garden, the same path, the same trees, and yet, each time, they are different. Each time, so are you. The afternoon unfolds with the kind of stillness that carries a weight all its own, not oppressive, but anchored. Soon you walk the narrow path along the eastern wall of the garden, where the pines lean slightly inward, as if listening to your steps. Their branches shade the stone beneath your feet, dappling the path with shifting ovals of light and quiet. You pause near the water basin. It has filled slightly with rain from the night before, its surface now scattered with pine needles. You dip your hand in slowly and lift a handful of water to your face. The droplets trail down your cheek without urgency. One clings to your chin before falling. You remain for a moment with your hand still in the water. The wind passes. It draws a low breath across the trees. From deeper in the compound, the sound of a broom sweeping tile one long pull, a pause, then another. You hear the rustle of a robe brushing against bamboo. A door slides open, then closes again. Each sound holds its place. You return to the main hall. The study is brighter now, sun having crossed the midpoint of the sky. The scrolls on the shelf reflect its light in the dull sheen of their lacquered edges. Your writing desk stands untouched. The page you composed this morning has dried fully. You read it again, then fold it once, slowly, and slide it into a cloth folder. It joins others like it, pages written not for record, but for rhythm. You do not linger over the ink. Instead, you reach for a different brush. Its bristles are stiffer, less delicate, better suited for larger strokes. You clear the table and lay out a wide sheet of paper. You grind the ink again, slower now, your arm moving in smooth circles until the pool of black is deep and mirror-like. Today, you do not write words, you paint a rock, one you saw yesterday on the garden path, rounded at the base, a single edge sharp, as if it had been broken once by time and left to settle. You do not sketch from memory, you sketch from rhythm. The brush touches paper, and a single broad stroke shapes the left flank of the rock. You pause. Another stroke curves the right edge. A dip, a rise, a cleft. You feel nothing, you suggest. When finished, you step back. The rock is there, not perfect, but present. You let the ink dry as you rinse the brush. Then you place it beside the others. The light shifts again. Outside, a servant has placed a fresh tea tray near the central veranda. You don't recall hearing her enter. She has already gone. You walk toward it, passing through bands of sunlight that cross the corridor like ribbons. You sit. The cup is warm. You lift it, sip once, barley again, but richer now, toasted longer, perhaps. You rest your free hand on your knee and let your shoulders lower by a fraction. Across the garden, a cat appears, white with a single black stripe on its back. It steps delicately along the veranda's edge, tail flicking, eyes half closed in contentment. It stops near the water basin, licks once at a pine needle, then lies down in a patch of sun. The hour has tilted. You feel it in your spine. Not weariness, return. You rise slowly, your robe catching slightly at the knee as you do. You walk through the rear corridor where a line of potted orchids faces the courtyard. One has bloomed today, just one, pale yellow with a deep red center. You touch its petal briefly. Cool, silken, back in the study. The painting has dried. You roll it carefully and place it with your other works. Not signed, not titled, not declared. You don't need it to be remembered. It has already served its purpose. A passage from a Ming era scroll on domestic cultivation reads, "Do not ask your tea to be famous. Ask only that it be warm." You smile faintly as you return to your seat. The cup is cooler now, but it is still enough. The light softens once more as late afternoon settles into its slow descent. You remain seated near the study, your teacup empty now, but still warm to the touch. A soft breeze traces the hallway, lifting the edge of a floor mat before allowing it to fall again without sound. Somewhere beyond the wall, a bird calls twice, as if confirming something only it can hear. You rise and walk toward the scroll cabinet. It contains only a few dozen items, each stored with care, some your own work, some copied texts, some sent by friends long gone. You select one of the oldest. Its wrapping cloth has faded from ochre to a mellowed tan. The corners are frayed. The silk tie is intact, but no longer smooth. You undo it slowly, and the scent of time slips out with the paper. Aged ink, dust, and something like dried chrysanthemum. You unroll the scroll on the table. It's a series of maxims written by an elder who taught in the mountains west of Luoyang. His hand was steady, even in old age. His brush strokes firm but never heavy. You read one line aloud. Act slowly, as if you have already arrived. You repeat it once, more quietly. The sentence sits beside you for a while. Then the wind moves through the room again, this time strong enough to stir the scroll's edge. You press it down with a polished inkstone and continue reading. The next maxim speaks of thresholds, how entering and leaving a room should be treated as separate acts, with their own attention. You nod slightly, then close the scroll. You do not need more today. You place the text back in its place, rewrap it, and return it to the shelf. Your movements are slower now, as if your limbs have begun to match the pace of the hour. You step out into the corridor and walk once more to the pond. The surface is still. It reflects the orange-hued walls of the house and a fragment of the moon, which now rises early, like a polite guest who prefers to be unnoticed. The fish do not move. The shadows do. You sit on the bench near the water, the same one where your morning tea cooled hours ago. The cushion there has been turned over by someone, probably a servant who saw it and thought you might return. You sit, your hands resting on your knees, your breath low and steady. A leaf detaches from a maple branch above you and spirals downward, its motion slow, almost uncertain. It lands near your sandal. You do not move it. A Ming essayist once suggested that one should allow the day to close itself, the way a scroll returns to stillness once its final line has been read, not forced, not folded, just returned. You close your eyes. The scent of water and pine reach you again when you open them. The cat from earlier sits at your feet. You hadn't noticed its arrival. It looks up at you once, then lies down, curling into a perfect oval. The garden dims. You remain still. The koi begin to stir again, not because they're hungry, not because of any change in temperature, simply because the shadows invite movement. They circle slowly, breaking the surface just enough to catch a fleck of light. then disappearing again. You rise, walk the same path back to the study, your hands loosely folded behind your back. Inside, the lamp has been lit. Not by you. Someone saw the hour turn and tended the flame before you arrived. You bow slightly at the threshold, as if entering the room for the first time, then step forward. The lamp inside the study burns with a steady glow. Its flame bends slightly, touched by air moving through the high lattice above the window. Shadows stretch softly across the table, pooling near the inkstone and paper rack like quiet thoughts not yet put into words. You close the door behind you, not to shut the world out, but to honor this space you've now entered. The day outside continues, but here you have stepped into evening. You sit before your writing table once more, not to compose, not to plan. You sit simply because the table is where you have always returned. The page before you is blank. You run your fingers lightly along the edges of the wood grain. The surface has held years of brushstrokes, ghosts of poems, letters never sent, sentences abandoned halfway through, but remembered in the body. Each mark polished into smoothness by habit, not erasure. You reach for your brush, hold it in silence, not to write, but to feel its weight. You set it back down. The scroll you painted yesterday, of the rock you noticed near the path, remains rolled and tied on the shelf. You do not unroll it. You simply glance toward it and acknowledge its presence. A Ming-era calligraphy guide once claimed that after the ink has dried, the true act of writing begins, not with your hand, but in your breath. You understand that now. You stand and move once more into the hall. Your robe sweeps faintly along the corridor's edge, brushing petals that have fallen and drifted inward from the garden. You step over one, you leave another, you descend into the rear garden. The air cooler now, the moon is higher, its light not yet silver, but far past gold. You sit on the stone step leading toward the bamboo grove. The sound of stalks tapping in the wind carries like distant speech, quiet, undeciphered, somehow familiar. You place your hands flat against the step. The stone is cold, steady, grounding. Above you, stars emerge, slowly, incompletely. You count the ones you can see without moving your eyes. 6, 7. Then you lose the count and stop trying behind you. A screen door slides open. A servant steps onto the veranda with a bowl in hand, congee, warm and fragrant, topped with pickled radish and slices of mushroom. A small spoon rests beside it. She sets it down quietly on the ledge near where you sit, then bows and disappears again without sound. You lift the bowl, steam curls into the air. The scent is earthy, familiar. You take a slow sip, letting the radish dissolve on your tongue. The radish is crisp, bright with vinegar, the mushroom soft as dusk. This is not a meal to remember, this is a meal to become. A scholar once wrote at night, "Let your hunger be for warmth, not fullness." You think of this as you finish the last bite, set the bowl aside, and return your attention to the sky. A cricket begins to chirp in the far end of the garden, then another answers. You sit, now warmed from within, body soft with comfort, mind empty of its edges. There is nothing left undone, not because everything was finished, but because nothing urgent ever began. You rise slowly. The bowl remains on the ledge. You know it will be gathered, washed, returned to its shelf before you wake. inside the house. The corridor lamps glow faintly behind thin paper. Each doorway spills just enough light to suggest life, but not noise. You pass each one, glancing through slightly parted screens, rooms of scrolls, of books, of resting cushions, everything in place, everything at rest. You enter your chamber. The window is open. The curtain flutters once, then stills. You remove your robe, fold it, set it beside your pillow, then lie down. Tonight, you do not need the blanket. The room holds warmth already. You close your eyes not to escape the world, but to meet it again, more quietly, more completely. You do not wake suddenly. The morning unfolds as if drawn by brushstroke, slow, deliberate, quiet along the edges. You remain still beneath your blanket, eyes open only slightly, watching the room shape itself again in the first gray light. The lamp has long since burned out. Its faint scent of oil still lingers in the air. You stretch once beneath the covers, not to rouse the body, but to greet it. Your robe waits on the bench beside your pillow, still folded from the night before. You reach for it slowly, slipping one arm in, then the other, the fabric brushing across your shoulders with the faintest rustle. You rise. The corridor outside is dim. The first servant has begun sweeping. Her broom moves in a patient rhythm, long, soft strokes, then a pause. You open your door gently. The house does not need to be disturbed. It is already aware of you. You walk the length of the corridor. Your sandals tap lightly, your robe brushing the edge of the wall. At the veranda, the air greets you, cool, slightly damp, but open. The sky is a low sheet of mist. No sun yet, just the softened suggestion of light beyond the clouds. You kneel beside the water basin, dip both hands into the chill, let it catch your breath in your throat. Then you wash your face. The world, as ever, is new. Your tea waits again, steamed lightly in the kettle by the back hearth. The servant has not yet returned to pour it. You prepare it yourself. 2 cups, as always. You sit in your study. The inkstone has been cleaned. A clean sheet of paper lies across the desk, the corners held down by polished stones. You pour tea, sip, and wait. The brush moves when ready. This morning, you write only a short verse. The water did not ask for anything from the stone, but still shaped it. You stop there. You place the brush on its rest. The page will dry in minutes, but you don't wait for it. You leave the paper exposed and walk once more into the courtyard. The garden is fuller than yesterday, not in size, but in presence. The leaves have shifted, a few new petals have fallen. The scent of earth rises more readily through the damp. You take a slow breath, then another. The koi move near the surface. You kneel at the edge of the pond. Rest your hands on your thighs, and let your gaze fall into the water. You see no reflections, only motion, only the soft shape of fish trailing each other in looping spirals. A bell sounds faintly. It does not signal a visitor, only rice being removed from the hearth. You stand and return to your room, not out of obligation, but because it is time. Time, here, does not measure, it guides. You dress for the afternoon, a darker robe today, blue-gray, lined in indigo thread. The weave is thick but soft, worn thin at the cuffs. You tie it and check the knot. It holds, as it always does. A passage from a late Ming journal returns to you. One does not repeat days. One lives them again differently. You smile faintly as you open your scroll cabinet. You choose the scroll from yesterday, the travelogue of nameless mountains. You roll it open halfway, then pause. The hut on the ledge, the bridge that goes nowhere, the open space left uninked. These images remain familiar, yet new each time. You trace one line with your finger, then close the scroll without reading the rest. Outside, the clouds have broken slightly. Light dapples the garden wall in patches. You sit again on the stone bench. The wind is gentle. You eat your lunch quietly, rice with black sesame, a single salted plum, and tofu wrapped in steamed greens. The servant leaves the tray and goes. You nod after her, but say nothing. The food is soft. It slows you, not from fullness, but from satisfaction. You finish your meal and let your gaze rest on the space between two trees, where nothing moves, but everything breathes. You return the tray yourself, place it beside the kitchen door. No one sees you, and that feels right. Afternoon slips into the compound like a final brushstroke on silk, quiet, uncorrectable, and beautifully enough. You step into your study one last time today, the weight of the door familiar beneath your palm. The light has shifted again, softer now, with gold brushed into its edges. Your robe gathers it as you move, a slow ripple across woven thread. The paper you wrote on this morning has dried. The ink has not bled. You fold the verse once, gently, and place it into the wooden box with the others, not alphabetized, not even dated, just placed where it belongs. Outside, the shadows have stretched. The garden now receives light only in patches, glimpses through leaves, slivers along stone, a single illuminated petal near the pond. The koi have disappeared into the deeper parts of the water. Even they rest. You pour yourself a final cup of tea. It is warm, no longer hot. You sip once, then again. You do not finish it. You carry the cup with you out into the garden, walking the long path past the camphor trees and toward the southern wall. Here, the corridor ends in a narrow alcove with a bench carved from a single piece of elm wood. You've visited this spot only a few times in recent weeks. It asks for stillness too deep for words. You sit, the cup in your hand now cold. The sky is darkening, but not yet dark. The first star appears. A soft line of cloud drifts past it and moves on, leaving the sky unchanged. You breathe slowly, one breath, then another. A fringe commentary found in the margins of a tea manual once claimed, "You do not drink tea to finish it. You drink it to return." You remember this as you place the cup on the stone ledge beside you, where the moss creeps close but never crosses. The wind sighs. The cat from earlier reappears, jumps up onto the ledge, then curls next to the cup as if guarding it. You say nothing. You do not move, even when the light fades further, and even when the stars begin to gather. Eventually, you return indoors. You bathe silently, methodically, pouring warm water from a clay vessel across your arms, your back, your chest. You towel dry without haste. Your robe for sleep is laid neatly on the bench, softer than your others. The stitching faint from time. You dress slowly, then sit by the lamp for a while, letting its flame offer a closing glow. Your last task of the day is not written. It is breath. It is stillness. You extinguish the lamp with a single gesture. The wick smokes gently, then stills. You lie down on your mat, hands folded loosely over your chest, blanket drawn to your ribs. The window lattice allows in only a slice of moonlight, casting one clear bar of silver across the floor. You stare at it for a moment, then close your eyes. Let your breath settle now. There's nothing left to arrange. The scrolls are closed. The tea has cooled. The wind has turned the last page of the day without making a sound. Let your body rest where it lies. Let the muscles soften, not from exhaustion, but from being understood. The room does not press in on you. It surrounds you gently, like a folded robe placed on sleeping shoulders. There is no candle to trim, no poem to finish, no voice calling your name, just the quiet, just the breath. Let's let it move slowly now, in and out. There is no need to recount your day. You lived it with full attention. Every step across the stone, every stroke of ink, every glance at the koi, these were your hours. And they have returned to the silence from which they came. Nothing more is required of you. The house will care for itself. The teacups will be cleaned. The lamp will be refilled. The breeze will visit the garden, whether you watch it or not. You may rest. You may let go of the line you didn't finish, the letter you didn't write, the name you forgot to speak. The stars are still overhead, and the wind, as ever, is waiting to return. Sleep now. The scholar's house is quiet, and it has remembered your name.